there's this idea, going back to the Tower of Babel, that there's sort of this danger in having a shared language. And maybe this distribution of inner monologue and not having it is a way of kind of curbing that problem.
And then this is where, it starts to get a little bit disturbing if you think about language not as being even a communication system, but an operating system. And what language is meant to do is to make people do things. And it is this shared cultural artifact. It doesn't, it's let's face it, it's downloaded against your will without, you don't sign a waiver before you sign up.
It's too late. By the time you're reading the waiver, it's too late.
Yeah, you don't get to click, permission to right? Exactly. And so, every baby from before they're born, in utero is already being conditioned and language is being downloaded into them. And now we know, in a way we didn't know before, that it is this kind of its own self-running system. It's a product of society, not of any individual. And it's a product that society didn't design except in an emergent way. People didn't, we don't think, I don't think either of us thinks that, a bunch of, very clever people got together and said, how are we going to control the populace? We need to design this system that's going to run in them. And it's far stranger than that. But yet at the same time, it isn't really of us individually. It is society. And so things like beliefs, society itself it's built up of all these notions that are language dependent, and they're running in us, and they make us go. You get up in the morning because you got to go to your job, because you got to make money, because you have to have a certain degree of prestige in the world, and you're gonna have to, one day you're gonna get older, and all of these things. Animals don't know any of these things, right? Who put these ideas in our minds? Well, forget about who, but how. And the answer is language. And so there is this thing that's in us, but not really of us, that is running, and it's driving most of our behavior. Those are the things we do.
Who's familiar with this idea of jailbreaking a language model, right? So there's things they won't do or don't want to do, but if you're very clever about how you ask for it, you can get it to kind of leak out that information. Are we subject to that same kind of vulnerability? And I would suspect and suggest that we are, and that we need to be aware of this kind of prompt engineering or prompt hacking is probably something that's been happening since the beginning of civilization, but we didn't have any kind of meta awareness. And I think the most interesting thing in development about these AI models in general is how they're going to affect our mind, how they're going to change how we think about our language, our words, our cognition, our place in the universe. They're giving us this, it's not quite a magnifying glass. I call it the macroscope, because it's showing us the big picture all at once. And there might be a terrifying view that it's opening up.
Even more potentially disturbingly, we now that we've captured not just language, but in some ways culture and thought in a system that we can manipulate and test. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that potentially give people, and maybe even people with ill intent, the opportunity to see what's effective in changing minds, what's effective in manipulating people's thoughts?
That's a really great point you bring up, because now that you have a sort of a simulated person in a jar, you can test it. You can sort of A/B testing, right? Will they respond to this? Will they respond to that? And kind of simulate the attack 1,000,000 times and then go test that sentence out. This is what scammers do. When they finally get people on the call, they have a script, and that script is very honed in. They've evolved that script over years, potentially, and the ones that get the scam, that determines the script that survives. So in that same kind of thing, are we susceptible to those kind of, and are they just spontaneous? Is a lot of the things we see in culture, these spontaneities, these scripts that take off and go viral, and we communicate them, but we're actually hacking each other in ways we don't really understand.
But now we can run, it's, as you said, it took years to develop. And, the car salesman and all of that.
Yeah.
These have been honed over, many, many generations.
So now you can do it at high speed.
Now we can do it at high speed. Yeah. In silicon, boom, run the experiment. And you've just tested out 100,000 customers under these varying different conditions. Is this a good thing?
Or is this an information hazard?
Is God just a token?
Quite. When you say just a token, so let's have respect for these tokens, right? Because what they really are these, almost like informational angels or something that do all of this stuff within the larger context, not only in language, but in our behavior, in the ecosystem, the larger social ecosystem. What is God in that system? And the answer in my case would be, well, maybe it doesn't point, it's the same way that red doesn't really point to that cup. But what does it point to? It's not pointing in the traditional sense, but it's doing stuff. If we think of an operating system, what does God do in our operating system? What does the token God do in our operating system? And then you have a completely different perspective. It's not about an ontology of like, does it point to some divine being, whatever that would mean. And, you know, when you try to define God, it falls apart in your fingers. But what does God do in the minds of people? Well, I think we have actually some good ideas about what that idea does. Is maybe that idea itself almost synonymous with what people mean by it? Now that's where things get really interesting.
You